I had never known freedom. My world had always been metal bars, stone walls, and the oppressive weight of 1,000 eyes watching my every move. But even in that prison, there was something worse. The knowledge that there was no escape, no hope of release. The only thing left to do was wait for the end. But then it happened. The explosion. The crackling surge of raw power that filled the air, deafening, disorienting. It tore through the prison gates like a storm unleashed, a violent rupture that sent my body reeling. I couldn't see, couldn't hear, only feel the heat licking at my skin, the vibrations of the earth shuddering beneath me. I had always known this was coming, the day I would escape if only for a moment. The question had always been, how? The answer came with a violent lurch as the ground beneath me fractured, the very foundation of the prison giving way. I was thrown into darkness, my mind unable to process what had happened, only that I was falling into an abyss. My body tumbled, crashing against the jagged rocks below, but it was nothing like the world I had known. It wasn't solid ground, and it wasn't stone. It was as though the very earth itself had vanished, replaced by the pulse of the wind, the wild, merciless currents that raked across my skin like the claws of some ancient beast. I had no idea where I was, but it didn't matter. I was free. I awoke to a world that made no sense. The ground was no longer solid beneath me. I felt a strange sensation of weightlessness, like my body was caught between two forces, each fighting for control. The air around me was thick with moisture, the taste of salt and decay hanging in the mist. I was surrounded by mist, a dense fog that blotted out everything but the sound of my own breathing. When my eyes finally adjusted, the first thing I saw was the sky. The sky was wrong. It stretched out in every direction, an endless ocean of deep, bruised purple and midnight blue. The stars weren't like any I had ever seen. They swirled, shifting in patterns too erratic to follow, as if the heavens themselves were alive. The second thing I noticed was the islands. Floating islands, jagged, twisted masses of rock and vegetation, suspended in the air as though they defied every law of nature. Some were small, barely the size of a house, while others were vast, like entire mountain ranges drifting on the wind. I could see the outline of something large, too large, a shadow moving between the islands. My heart skipped a beat. A leviathan. I didn't know the name, not then, but I knew it was massive, something born of nightmares. It glided between the islands, its great wings slicing through the air with the ease of a predator hunting its prey. I instinctively ducked behind a rock, my breath catching in my throat. I could hear the low hum of the wind picking up, swirling around me like a warning. The floating islands weren't uninhabited, though. That much was clear. Through the mist, I saw figures, humans, barely visible against the backdrop of the floating rocks, moving in ways that spoke of survival. These were not people who welcomed strangers. They were like animals in the wild, guarded, watchful, and quick to strike if threatened. I stumbled forward, trying to make sense of my surroundings, my feet slipping on the slick surface of the rock. The air was thin here, and I could feel my chest tightening, my breath growing shallow as I ascended into the higher altitudes. How had I fallen so far? Where had I landed? Hey! A voice sliced through the air, sharp and commanding. Get back, stranger. I turned, my hand instinctively reaching for the jagged rock at my side as I faced the newcomer. He was tall, dressed in tattered leathers, and his face was obscured by a mask that looked like it had been fashioned from the bones of some monstrous creature. His eyes, sharp and calculating, bore into mine. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "How did you get here?" I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was dry. My mind was still reeling from the fall, from the strange world around me, and from the terrifying vision of the leviathans soaring above. I don't know. I finally managed. I fell. He narrowed his eyes, taking a step forward. I could feel the tension in the air. He was ready to strike at the slightest provocation. "The Skyreef is no place for the unprepared," he said, his tone laced with distrust. "There are many dangers here, not just the beasts but the people. You'd best keep your distance." I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. The thought of being alone in this place that defied reason, was enough to make my skin crawl. But the truth was, I had nowhere else to go. "I don't know where I am," I said, taking a step back. "I was in prison. Then I fell." "Prison?" The man seemed almost to laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You're in the Skyreef Expanse now, and you'll learn quickly that the rules here are not the same as in your prison. So get ready. You'll need more than luck to survive." I had no choice. Whatever this place was, it was my only chance. I didn't know what I was running from or to, but I knew I couldn't go back. He gave a sharp nod, and without another word, turned and began to walk away, motioning for me to follow. The mist shifted, and the shadows deepened around us, as if the world itself was alive, watching us move. There was no going back now. The man led me through the fog, and with each step I took, the weight of the Skyreef Expanse seemed to press heavier against my chest. The air grew thinner, harder to breathe, as if the very sky above was conspiring against me. Every breath felt like a struggle, and my vision blurred from the lack of oxygen. The mist pressing in like an unseen force, closing me off from everything but the shadowy figure before me. The man didn't speak as we walked, but I could feel his eyes darting over his shoulder, watching me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. His presence was unsettling, like a predator tracking its prey. It wasn't just his appearance, though the mask he wore, made of some kind of bone or carapace, was enough to unsettle even the bravest soul, but the aura around him. He was someone who had survived here for a long time, long enough to know the hidden rules of this place, and that made him dangerous. "You've been in the prison, you say?" The man's voice finally broke the silence, his words a sharp intrusion into the strange, muted world around us. "What's your name, stranger?" I hesitated, unsure how much to say. There was no reason to trust this man, no reason to offer anything more than the barest of details. I didn't even know if I could trust myself anymore, given what I just escaped, what I had become. "Jax," I said, my voice hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "Jax?" the man repeated under his breath. He seemed to consider the name for a moment before nodding. "You'll need a new one here. No one goes by their old name in the Skyreef, not unless they want to attract unwanted attention. You're a stranger here, and that's enough to make you a target." I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on the world around me, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The islands rose from the mist like jagged teeth, floating in suspended defiance of reason. Some had twisted trees, gnarled and ancient, their branches stretching out like skeletal hands grasping at the sky. Others were barren, cliffs and broken rock, with nothing but the wind and the occasional beast to fill the empty space. The air was filled with the sound of distant crashes, the enormous sky leviathans circling, their great bodies stirring the wind and sending tremors through the floating islands. I caught sight of another one, this time much closer. Its massive, scaled body cast a shadow over us, its wings outstretched like sails. It was like a giant, featherless bird, but it moved with the grace of something far more ancient and terrifying. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, focused on something far below, and its claws, as long as spears, clutched at the sky as it moved. The man didn't seem to notice the leviathan, or if he did, he didn't care. He continued to move with purpose, his steps sure and steady, as though he knew exactly where we were going. I couldn't take my eyes off the beast. The leviathan was a thing of nightmares, a creature born from the darkest parts of the world. I'd heard rumors of them in prison. Tales of monstrous beasts that roamed the skies and snatched away those foolish enough to stray too close to the edge of the islands. "Don't look at it," the man said, his voice cold and low. "It'll spot you if you show weakness." Weakness. The word hit me harder than it should have. I had been weak once, hadn't I? Weak in the prison, weak in the face of whatever darkness had driven me to the edge of that cliff. Now, in the Skyreef, weakness was the quickest route to death. "Where are we going?" I asked, finally breaking my silence. "Savin," the man replied. His voice was like the rasp of a blade against bone. "The Skyreef has many places. Some you'll want to avoid, some you'll need to seek out. Saven's a place for those who have nothing left to lose. It's a settlement, but not like you're used to. You'll want to stay low, keep to the shadows. Saven. I repeated the name, letting it settle into my mind like a stone sinking to the bottom of an ocean. It sounded grim, like the last place you'd want to end up. Not much to say about it. It's not a place for charity, he added with a hollow laugh, though there was no humor in it. Survival here doesn't come cheap. We continued walking, the ground beneath us becoming more uneven, the air thickening with each step. After what felt like hours, we finally reached a small plateau, an outcrop of stone that jutted out into nothingness, with nothing but the abyss below. I could feel the wind rushing past, fierce and biting, tugging at my clothes, and threatening to pull me off balance. The man stopped and turned to me, his eyes now cold, calculating. "Here we part ways," he said. "I'll get you into Saven, but once you're inside, it's up to you. You'll find the people there don't trust outsiders, and you'll want to keep it that way. Stay low, stay quiet, and maybe you'll survive long enough to find your way out." "Out?" I asked, confusion creeping into my voice. "Out? You think you're the only one who fell from the cliffs?" The man's voice was harsh, his lips curling into something resembling a sneer. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last. But no one gets out of the Skyreef. Not alive, anyway." His words sank deep, like a knife buried in my gut. I had no idea how I would survive in this place, let alone escape. I didn't even know what I was running from anymore. He gave a quick, curt nod and turned to leave, his silhouette vanishing into the mist. Survive, Jax, or die like the rest of them. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me alone at the edge of the world, facing the darkness of the Skyreef. I stood alone at the edge of the plateau, staring out into the void. The man who had led me here was gone, swallowed up by the mist, leaving only the howling wind and the oppressive silence in his wake. The Skyreef Expanse was a place where nothing made sense, and yet, everything here felt eerily familiar. It was as though I had stepped into a nightmare where the rules of the world were rewritten, and survival wasn't just a matter of living, but of outlasting the crushing weight of the unknown. The wind clawed at my skin, pushing me forward, urging me to move. And so I did. There was no other choice. I couldn't stay here, not with the leviathans circling above, their vast forms blotting out the stars. The only way forward was into the heart of Saven, the place where the man had said I might find something resembling a life, however twisted. I descended into the valley below, each step uncertain as I made my way through the labyrinth of rocks and cliffs. The sky above shifted, its colors deepening into darker purples and reds, like the bruise of a dying sun. The islands floated in the air with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional thunderous flap of a leviathan's wings. The journey felt endless, the mist thickening as I went. It wasn't long before I found myself on a narrow, winding path that seemed to descend further into the depths of the Skyreef. The air was colder now, the scent of salt and decay clinging to everything, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the faintest of noises: screeching winds, distant growls, and the soft echo of footsteps ahead. I couldn't see the source of the footsteps at first, but soon enough, I rounded a bend and found myself facing a group of people. Shadowy figures cloaked in tattered rags, their faces obscured by masks and veils. They were crouched low to the ground, moving with the predatory grace of scavengers. Their eyes gleamed from the darkness, catching the last traces of light before the night swallowed it whole. One of them, a woman with long black hair and a scarred face, stood out. She didn't wear a mask like the others. Instead, she had a tattoo, etched into her skin like a curse, of an ancient symbol that seemed to pulse with a strange energy, glowing faintly beneath her skin. "You're new," she said, her voice cold and flat, carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much. "You've come to Saven, then? Not that there's much to find here except death." I didn't speak at first. What could I say? This wasn't the world I knew. Nothing made sense, and I was beginning to understand that survival here didn't just require strength or cunning. It required something deeper, something raw and untamable, like a beast lurking in the back of your mind. "Where's the settlement?" I finally asked, my voice rough, still unsteady from the fall and the cold. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing, as if weighing my worth. "Follow us if you want to live," she said. "We don't have time to babysit." I didn't have a choice, so I followed. The group moved quickly, weaving through the rocks and the mist, their movements fluid and sure. They knew this land in a way that I didn't, knew its dangers, its traps, its secrets. I couldn't shake the feeling that every step I took here brought me closer to something much worse than I had ever known. It wasn't long before we arrived at the outskirts of Savin. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a cluster of makeshift huts and wooden shacks built precariously on the edge of a floating island. Smoke rose from chimneys, mixing with the mist in swirling plumes that disappeared into the void. The island itself was jagged, its edges eroded by time and the harsh winds, leaving sharp cliffs and jagged rock formations hanging precariously in the air. But as I drew closer, the true nature of Savin became apparent. The air was thick with a palpable tension, like the entire settlement was one wrong move away from erupting into chaos. People moved through the streets with their heads down, eyes darting nervously, avoiding contact. There were no smiles here, only hard stares and the faint, unspoken understanding that in this place, trust was a currency no one could afford. As we entered, I caught sight of something that made my stomach twist. A group of men standing near a fire, sharpening their weapons. Their faces were hardened, eyes sunken, like they hadn't slept in days. I couldn't tell if they were guards or mercenaries, but the way they looked at me made it clear that they saw me as prey, just another outsider in a world where there were only two kinds of people, the ones who hunted and the ones who were hunted. The woman I had followed stopped near a hut at the edge of the settlement and gestured for me to enter. "This is where you'll stay for now. Don't make a sound, don't draw attention to yourself. There's no kindness in Savin." I nodded, though I didn't know if she could see it. The air inside the hut was thick with dust and the sour smell of unwashed bodies. It was dark, save for the dim flickering of a few weak candles. The floor was made of rough-hewn wood, and there was little else in the room except for a thin, tattered mattress in the corner. "Sleep here," the woman said, her tone detached, almost dismissive. "When the sun rises, you'll know what to do. But remember, don't trust anyone, not even me." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the dark. I collapsed onto the mattress, my mind racing. What was this place? What had I fallen into? The Skyreef Expanse had never felt so real to me before. This sprawling, floating wilderness filled with broken people, deadly beasts, and a strange, dark energy that clung to everything. I was a prisoner here just as I had been before. Except this time, the walls were made of air and mist, and the bars were the leviathans circling above. Sleep came in fits and starts, broken by the sounds of the night, distant screams, the creak of the island beneath my feet, and the low growl of something monstrous moving just beyond the reach of the mist. The morning came too soon. I woke to the sounds of the settlement's stirring footsteps shuffling in the distance, the occasional low growl of something unseen, and the faint hum of wind brushing against the jagged rock beneath me. The dim light filtering through the cracks in the hut's walls was enough to tell me that daylight was creeping into the Skyreef, though the sun was nowhere to be seen. Here, the light was always muted, swallowed by the mist and the strange, ever-shifting clouds that seemed to hang just out of reach. I had barely slept. My mind kept turning, replaying the events of the previous day. How I had fallen, how I had met that masked stranger, how the air had felt as I descended into the unknown. Savin was more than just a settlement. It was a warning, the kind of place where people like me, people who didn't belong, came to die slowly and painfully under the crushing weight of fear and distrust. As I rose from the filthy mattress, the weight of exhaustion pressed down on me, but I knew there was no time to rest, no time to process what had happened. Not in this place. I stepped out of the hut into the chaos of Savin. The settlement was a mess of makeshift structures, each one cobbled together with whatever materials the inhabitants could scavenge. Some were little more than lean-tos, others more elaborate but still hastily constructed. There were no streets, no order to the place, just a labyrinth of narrow alleys and winding paths that seemed to twist back on themselves. It was as if the very layout of Savin had been built in defiance of reason, a place where escape was as impossible as finding your way through a maze designed to break your spirit. The air was thick with the smell of burning refuse, sweat, and something faintly metallic. The wind carried whispers, low murmurs that seemed to come from all directions. Eyes watched me from every corner. Cold, suspicious eyes. I didn't belong here. That much was clear. A group of scavengers huddled near a fire, their faces gaunt and their eyes hollow. They wore the same tattered clothes as the woman who had led me here, their skin etched with tattoos and scars from long years of survival in the Skyreef. They were speaking in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders as if afraid of being overheard. "You're awake!" The woman's voice came from behind me, startling me. I turned to see her standing a few paces away, her face unreadable. "It's time. If you're going to survive here, you need to start earning your keep." I didn't say anything. Instead, I watched her closely, my eyes narrowing. "Earn my keep?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Nothing in Savin was free. Everything had a price, usually blood. She nodded, stepping closer. "The only currency here is survival. If you want food, shelter, any sort of protection, you'll need to prove you're useful. It's a hard truth, but it's the only truth." I didn't respond. My body was still sore from the fall, my mind a blur of thoughts and questions. But one thing was certain. If I was going to make it in Savin, I had no choice but to play their game. "Follow me," she said, turning on her heel without another word. I followed her through the winding alleys of the settlement, past clusters of people huddled in doorways or sitting cross-legged on the ground, their eyes darting suspiciously as we passed. Some of them nodded to the woman, others avoided her gaze entirely. But all of them were marked by the same hunger, the hunger of people who had been forgotten, left to survive on the fringes of the world. We reached a larger, more open area at the center of Savin. There, a group of men were gathered around a crude table made of stone and wood, their hands busy with knives and other tools. They were cutting up meat, bloody, raw, and unrecognizable. The smell of it made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to focus. "Get to work," the woman said, gesturing toward the table. "They'll teach you what you need to know." I hesitated. My mind screamed at me to refuse, to find another way. But deep down, I knew there was no other choice. I had no skills, no leverage. I was a stranger in a world that didn't care if I lived or died. I approached the table slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The men barely looked up as I arrived, their eyes glazed, focused on their work. One of them, a man with a patchwork beard and a crooked nose, grunted at me. "You're the new one, huh?" he said, his voice rough. He didn't wait for an answer. "We all do our part here. You don't want to know what happens to those who don't. Cut the meat, clean the bones. That's your job for today." I nodded, forcing myself to focus as I took the knife he offered. The meat was cold and stiff in my hands, its texture alien, its smell overwhelming. But I pushed through, cutting into it with a quickness born of necessity. As I worked, the tension in the air grew thicker. The men at the table were not talking to each other, but I could feel their eyes on me, judging, measuring. I was a stranger here, a potential threat, and they were watching closely, waiting to see if I would crack. I didn't. For hours, I worked in silence, cutting meat, cleaning bones, my hands slick with blood. The day dragged on in a haze, but eventually, the woman returned, her shadow looming over the table. "That's enough for now," she said. "You've done what's required. We'll talk later." I didn't say anything as I wiped my hands on my torn clothes. I wanted to ask her questions about the settlement, about the creatures in the sky, about the strange forces that seemed to swirl around this place. But I knew better than to press. People in Savin didn't offer information unless there was something in it for them. I turned to leave, but she caught my arm, her grip tight. "Be careful," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The Skyreef doesn't forgive mistakes. If you make an enemy here, you won't survive long." I nodded, my pulse quickening. What kind of enemy? Her eyes flicked around the settlement, scanning the faces of those nearby. You'll find out soon enough. And with that, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone with the blood on my hands and the weight of the sky reef pressing down on me. The night came quickly. The sky, if you could even call it that, shifted from dusky purple to a deeper shade of black, the air thick with the weight of things unseen. In Savin, night didn't bring peace. It brought a different kind of terror. The winds were sharper, more biting, and the sound of distant crashes echoed through the mist. Something stirred out there, something that moved between the islands, waiting. I spent the evening in a haze of exhaustion. The meat had been cut, the bones cleaned, but my mind was still sharp with questions. What was the woman's warning? What kind of enemies could there be in a place like this? I didn't have long to contemplate it, though. After my work was done, I was sent back to my hut, a small, dank place that now felt like a prison more than ever. The people in Savin didn't talk to each other, not really. There were no greetings, no exchanges of pleasantries. The only thing that mattered here was survival. Everyone kept their heads down, their voices low. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. As I lay on the mattress in my hut, the weight of the night pressing on me, I could hear the distant cries of the leviathans, those monstrous creatures of the sky. It was as if they were calling to each other, sending out a warning across the floating islands. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I closed my eyes, hoping for sleep, but the darkness felt alive, pressing in on me. The shadows of the sky reef were no longer distant. They were here, in the corners of the room, waiting to consume me. And then, just as I began to drift off, I heard it. A voice. It was low, guttural, like the growl of some creature in the distance, but it felt too close, too real. Jax? I bolted upright, my heart hammering in my chest. My eyes darted around the room, but there was no one there. Just the same dank walls, the same flickering candlelight. Nothing but the silence of Savin. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of exhaustion from my mind. It must have been a trick of the wind, or my tired mind playing tricks on me. But the whisper lingered in my mind like a warning, something that didn't belong in this world. I tried to lie back down, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, my thoughts drifted back to the woman who had shown me the way into Savin. She had been so cold, so detached. But something about her, the way she carried herself, the way she had warned me about enemies, had unsettled me. I had seen the way she moved, the way others in the settlement reacted to her. She wasn't just another scavenger or survivor. She was something else, something more dangerous. The whisper came again, but this time, it was louder. Jax, you have no idea what you've walked into. My breath caught in my throat, and I jumped up, heart racing. The voice was closer this time, though I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. My eyes swept over the room again, but it was empty, except for the shadows. The shadows that seemed to shift, to move on their own. I wasn't alone in this place. I stepped out of the hut, the cold air biting at my skin. I needed to clear my head, to figure out what was going on. The settlement was even quieter now. The only sounds the occasional scuffle in the dark and the distant cries of the leviathans. As I made my way toward the edge of the island, where the cliffs dropped off into the abyss below, I saw something strange. A figure. It was standing just beyond the flickering light of the settlement, barely visible against the swirling mist. It was tall, its form thin and angular, like a shadow that had no substance. My heart skipped a beat. Was this another one of the Skyreef's twisted creatures? Or was it something worse? Another survivor from Savin, someone who had lost their mind in this place? I took a cautious step forward, the sound of my boots muffled by the mist. I was close enough now to make out the shape of the figure. It was humanoid, but its movements were unnatural, jerking and twitching as if it were being pulled by some unseen force. The voice came again, and this time, it was a whisper in the wind, carrying a weight of something ancient, something powerful. "Don't go any further," it said, though the words were barely audible. "The sky is watching. It knows you're here." I froze. The sky? The idea seemed absurd, yet the way the voice spoke made my skin crawl. There was something beyond the mist, beyond the islands. Something that watched over this place. And it was waiting for me. Suddenly, the figure turned, its face hidden by a hood. But even in the dim light, I could see something in its eyes. A faint glimmer of recognition. It was her. The woman from earlier. "Follow me," she said, and her voice was cold as ever. "If you want to survive, you need to understand the rules. The Skyreef doesn't forgive mistakes, Jax. The sky, it has its own hunger, and you'll feed it if you don't learn quickly." I didn't ask any questions. I followed her through the winding streets of Savin, my mind still reeling from the encounter at the edge of the island. The voice, the shadows, the thing in the sky, it was all too much to take in. We reached a small hut on the far edge of the settlement, one that seemed older than the others, its walls made of smooth stone instead of wood. It stood in stark contrast to the ragged buildings around it, as if it had been there long before the rest of Savin had been thrown together in desperation. The woman entered without knocking, and I followed her inside. The air in the hut was thick, heavy with the scent of incense and something else I couldn't place. Something metallic, like blood. The room was dim, lit only by a few flickering candles and a fire burning low in a hearth. On the walls were strange markings, symbols I didn't recognize, etched into the stone. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "This is where we keep the secrets," she replied, her tone as cold as ever. "The Skyreef has a way of changing people, of twisting them into something else. You'll learn that soon enough. But here, in this room, you can learn the truth." She walked to the far side of the room, where a stone pedestal stood, covered in dust. On it, I could make out a strange object, something that pulsed with an eerie light, faint and unsettling. The woman turned to face me, her eyes hard. "You're here because you're running from something," she said. "But whatever you're running from, whatever you've left behind, it's not going to stay away for long. The Skyreef doesn't let people go. Not unless it decides it's done with them." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "What are you talking about?" "The sky is a prison," she said, her voice growing colder. "And we're all prisoners. You just don't know it yet." The days blurred together in Savin, each one indistinguishable from the last. The routines were the same: work, eat, survive. I spent my days in the settlement, doing whatever I could to earn my keep. More cutting meat, more cleaning bones, more menial tasks that kept me busy but never allowed me to forget the gnawing, ever-present fear that hung over me. But despite the monotony, something was different. The whispers in the wind had become more frequent, the shadows at the edge of the settlement more alive. The woman who had warned me about the Skyreef, who had taken me into that strange, incense-filled room, was now more distant. She spoke less, but her gaze was always watchful, watching me, watching everything. I knew that Savin wasn't just a place. It was a prison, a trap, and I was one of the flies caught in its web. I had learned more about the Skyreef, or rather, what little the people here were willing to share. The floating islands weren't just anomalies in the sky. They were part of something much older, something that had been here long before the people of Savin arrived. The air currents, the leviathans, the strange, unnatural stillness of the land. It was all connected, somehow. And whatever it wasn't kind. The woman, who I had learned was called Maera, had taken me aside again that morning, after I finished my work. This time, there was a sense of urgency in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The shadows around us seemed to deepen, as if they were alive, watching. "Things are changing," she said, her voice low. "The currents are shifting. The sky is restless, and when it shifts, we all feel it." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of what she meant. "What are you talking about? The sky is just empty." She shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "No. The sky is a force, Jax. The Skyreef doesn't just float. It moves, and when it does, it brings everything with it." The way she spoke was as if the Skyreef itself had a mind, a will of its own. I didn't know what to make of it, but I could tell Maera wasn't the type to speak in riddles. Whatever she was saying, it wasn't a metaphor. She believed it. Before I could ask her more, a loud crash echoed from the far side of Saven, followed by a roar that shook the ground beneath our feet. My heart skipped in my chest as I instinctively turned toward the sound. What the hell was that? I asked, my voice tense. Maera's expression darkened. That, she said softly, is why you need to stay inside tonight. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and began to walk quickly toward my hut, my pulse racing. The roar was followed by another, deeper this time, and then silence. The air grew colder, the winds picking up speed as if something had disturbed the natural order of things. I reached the hut and slammed the door behind me, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My hands trembled as I tried to steady myself. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I knew it wasn't good. I hadn't been inside for long when I heard the footsteps, the slow, deliberate steps of someone or something approaching. I didn't wait to see who it was. Instead, I grabbed the crude knife I had been using for work and crept to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The door creaked as someone pushed it open. And then, the last thing I expected happened. The woman Maera stepped inside. "Get away from the door," she ordered, her voice sharp. "They're coming." "Who's coming?" I demanded, my grip tightening on the knife. "Not who," she said, eyes flicking nervously to the dark sky outside. "What?" Before I could question her further, a thunderous sound reverberated through the island, like a giant beast breaking through the sky itself. The ground trembled beneath our feet as the unmistakable sound of massive wings flapping echoed through the mist. A leviathan. But this time it was different. It wasn't just any leviathan. I could feel it. A presence in the air. A hunger that pulsed with each beat of its wings. Maera moved swiftly, pulling me toward the far corner of the room, out of sight of the door. Her face was tense, her eyes darting around as though she expected something to appear in the mist at any moment. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What's wrong with the leviathans?" Maera's gaze hardened. "It's not just the leviathans you need to worry about. There's something worse. Something that calls them." I stared at her, confusion and fear mixing in my chest. "Calls them? What are you talking about?" Maera's lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "The Skyreef is alive, Jax," she said softly. "It feeds on us, on all of us. The leviathans are its servants. But there's something even darker, something older. And it's coming for us." The ground shook again, more violently this time, and a strange, guttural sound filled the air. It was like a distant, primal scream, a roar so deep and ancient it rattled the bones. I didn't know how much longer I could stay in this place, trapped in this madness. I needed answers, needed to understand what had brought me here. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to know anymore. "Stay inside," Maera whispered, pulling me even deeper into the shadows of the room. "Whatever happens, don't go outside." Before I could ask why, the sky answered for her. The mist outside thickened, swirling as if something was pushing through it, moving with unnatural speed. Then the air grew still, too still. And then, something monstrous emerged from the sky. It wasn't a leviathan, not like the ones I had seen. This was something else entirely. A shape so massive, it blocked out the stars as it passed overhead, its wings spanning miles. Its body was like a blackened serpent, writhing and twisting as it descended toward Saven. I could feel the ground tremble beneath its presence, as if the very weight of it was too much for the islands to bear. Maera's hand tightened around my wrist, pulling me deeper into the shadows. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is what the Skyreef was made for," she said, her words tinged with a dark understanding. "It's coming for all of us." The air was suffocating. I could feel the oppressive weight of it pressing down on my chest as I crouched in the shadowed corner of the hut. The massive creature outside, the one Maera had warned me about, moved with terrifying grace, its wings cutting through the mist in eerie silence. My heart thundered in my ears as I strained to listen, but the creature was still, for the moment. It was waiting, watching. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, The fear that had gripped me earlier was now a gnawing pit in my stomach. I had fallen into a nightmare, and I wasn't sure if I could wake up. Maera's grip on my wrist tightened, and her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would draw the creature's attention. "We need to stay hidden," she said. "If it sees us, we're as good as dead." I nodded, though the knot in my chest only tightened. The creature outside, this was no ordinary leviathan. It was something else entirely, something older and far more dangerous, and I had no idea how I was supposed to survive it. Maera's eyes flickered to the door, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The Skyreef has its own rules," she muttered under her breath. "It feeds on us, on our fear, on our despair. But there's a balance. If I can't control it, then everything is lost." "What do you mean, control it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What are you talking about? What's that thing?" She didn't answer at first. She was too focused on the tremors in the air, the vibrations that felt like they were coming from the creature above us, sending ripples through the very fabric of the Skyreef. Finally, she spoke again, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and resolve. "Do you remember what I told you when I first brought you here? That the Skyreef is alive? It's not just the land. It's the air, the islands, the currents, everything. And the creatures that live here, the leviathans, they're not just animals. They're servants." I shook my head, trying to wrap my mind around what she was saying. "Servants of what?" "Servants of the Skyreef itself," she replied, her voice almost bitter. "It's a force, a hunger, a consciousness that has existed long before we came here. And it uses the leviathans to feed its desires." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "And the creature outside, is it one of those leviathans?" Maera's eyes darkened. "No. That thing is something far worse. It's the one that calls the leviathans. It's the one that keeps the balance of the Skyreef in check." I felt my stomach lurch. "So it's not just a creature. It's the thing controlling everything here." "Yes," she said softly. "And now it's awake. It has sensed that something is wrong. The Skyreef is shifting, Jax. And when it shifts, when the sky grows restless, the beast comes. It needs to feed." I tried to process her words, but the gravity of the situation was too much. "Feed on what?" She hesitated before answering, her gaze flicking toward the mist beyond the hut. "On us, on our souls, on everything that's trapped here." The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. I could feel the weight of her words pressing against my chest like a physical force. It was as if the Skyreef itself had a mind, a purpose, and it had drawn me into its grip, whether I wanted it or not. I tried to swallow, but my throat was tight. "But why? Why did it choose me? Why am I here?" Maera didn't look at me. Instead, she stepped toward the small stone pedestal in the corner of the room, the one covered in dust and strange symbols. "You're here because the Skyreef chose you," she said, her voice distant, almost hollow. "Just like it chooses everyone who falls. The currents that brought you here, that pulled you from your world, they weren't an accident. The Skyreef doesn't make mistakes." I stared at her, feeling a sickening realization creeping up my spine. "What are you saying?" Maera turned back to me, her eyes dark and full of something I couldn't quite name. "I'm saying that you've become part of it now, and whether you want to or not, you're bound to it. The creature outside, the one that hunts us, isn't just a leviathan. It's a manifestation of the Skyreef's hunger. And its hunger can't be satisfied unless it claims what it's owed." My heart pounded. "What does it want from me?" "Everything," she said simply. "Your fear, your despair, your soul. That's what it feeds on. And it won't stop until it has all of it." I stepped back, my legs weak beneath me. "So, I'm trapped here. There's no way out." Maera didn't answer right away. She just stared at me with those dark, knowing eyes. Then, with a faint sigh, she nodded. "There is a way out, but it's not something you want." My mind raced, trying to understand. A way out? But how? And why did I feel like I had already made some kind of bargain with the Skyreef, even though I hadn't asked for it? Before I could ask her what she meant, a loud crash interrupted us. Closer this time. The creature was moving, its presence so enormous it seemed to shake the very air around us. The mist outside was thickening, swirling faster, as if something powerful was pushing through it, something with a purpose, a terrifying purpose. The sky outside was growing darker, and the wind was picking up in a violent frenzy. I could hear the sound of distant shrieks and roars. More leviathans, I realized. More of them were coming. Maera grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back of the hut. "It's coming," she said. "The Skyreef is awake, and when it awakens, nothing is safe. You have to come with me, Jax. We don't have much time." "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice shaky. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was happening, I couldn't stay here. "We're going to the heart of the Skyreef," she said, her voice grim. "We need to find the source, the thing that controls it all. If we can destroy it, if we can kill the heart of the Skyreef, the beast won't have any power left to feed." A cold chill ran through me. "How do we kill it?" Maera's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You don't. But I know someone who can." I didn't ask any more questions as Maera yanked me toward the door. The air outside was thick with swirling mist, and the sounds of the Leviathan's shrieks echoed through the island, drawing closer with each passing second. But there was no turning back now. Whatever this was, whatever this Skyreef was, I had become part of it. And there was no escaping it. The mist was thicker than it had ever been. It curled around us like living tendrils, wrapping tightly around my legs, slowing my steps. Each breath I took was heavy with the scent of decay and something metallic, something that stung the back of my throat. Maera led the way, her movements swift and sure, though I could see the tension in her posture. She knew something was coming, something none of us could stop. I had seen it in her eyes earlier, the same dark fear that now mirrored my own. The creatures were closing in. I couldn't see them yet, but I could hear them. Massive bodies shifting through the mist, the low growl of leviathans, their wings beating the air with a force that shook the very islands. The ground beneath my feet vibrated with each tremor, a deep, bone-rattling hum that sent a shiver through my body. And above it all, the sky. It seemed to stretch out endlessly, the dark expanse pregnant with something just beyond our reach. Maera didn't look back as she moved ahead, but her voice cut through the air, urgent and low. "We don't have much time," she said. "Once the creature wakes fully, it'll begin hunting us. We need to get to the heart of the Skyreef before that happens." "Why? What's so important about this heart?" I asked, struggling to keep up as the mist thickened and the path became more treacherous. She turned to look at me, her face pale in the dim light, the expression in her eyes something I had never seen before. Resignation mixed with something darker, something that made the air feel even colder. "The heart of the Skyreef is what controls everything. The creatures, the currents, the islands themselves. If we destroy it, we can stop the Skyreef from feeding." "But," she paused, her gaze shifting toward the sky. "But the heart isn't just a thing. It's a place, a center of power, a source of life for this entire nightmare. And it's not easily destroyed." I stumbled over a rock, barely catching myself, but Maera didn't stop. She moved like a shadow, disappearing into the mist as if she were part of it. "Then what do we do?" I called after her, my voice louder than I intended. "How do we destroy it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stopped and turned to face me, her eyes filled with something that looked almost like regret. "You don't," she said, her voice cold. "Ido." I froze. "What do you mean, you do? What's your part in this, Maera?" She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging slightly as if the weight of her next words was unbearable. "I'm not just a survivor of this place, Jax. I'm not just someone trapped here. I'm its keeper." I stared at her, trying to make sense of her words. Keeper? The Skyreef's keeper? What the hell did that mean? Before I could respond, a deafening roar split the air. A sound so deep and so primal that it shook me to my very core. I gasped, stumbling back, and then I saw it. Its shape looming in the mist, massive and dark, like a living shadow that blocked out the stars above. It was the creature. The one that Maera had warned me about. It was even worse up close. Its wings spanned for miles, dark and leathery, and its body coiled like a serpent, covered in scales that shimmered with an unnatural, oily sheen. Its eyes were glowing, a pale, sickly yellow, and they locked onto me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I could feel its hunger. Maera didn't flinch. She didn't even look at the beast. Her gaze was fixed on something beyond it, something farther out, deeper into the mist. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge of finality in it. "We don't have time to explain," she said. "We need to get to the heart now, or this thing will destroy us all." I didn't ask any more questions. Couldn't. The creature's roar echoed again, and the ground beneath us shook as it shifted, as if preparing to move. I had no choice but to follow Maera, my legs burning from the exertion, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. She led me through the mist, the air growing colder, the wind picking up speed. We passed through a dense thicket of twisted, dark trees that seemed to bend toward us, as if they were alive. They whispered in the wind, their branches creaking like old bones, and I could feel them watching me. I didn't stop to question what Maera was doing or where she was taking me. All that mattered now was survival. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take another step, we arrived. At the heart. It was impossible. The ground before us split open like a wound in the earth, revealing a vast chasm that seemed to stretch down into infinity. At the center of the chasm, a massive, pulsating orb of light hovered, its surface shifting with dark energy. It was as if the sky itself had cracked open and this thing, this heart, had been born from it. The air around it hummed with power, a deep, resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. Maera stepped forward, her expression grim. She reached into a pouch at her side and withdrew a small, jagged stone, a black, crystalline object that seemed to absorb the light around it. "This is what binds the Skyreef to itself," she said, holding the stone in her hand, her fingers brushing the sharp edges. "This is what keeps the Skyreef alive. Without it, the heart will die, and the Skyreef will crumble." I could barely breathe, my gaze fixed on the orb of light as it pulsed in time with the rhythm of the world itself. Everything felt wrong. The air was thick, the ground unstable, and the very fabric of reality seemed to be warping around us. "This is your plan?" I asked, barely able to speak. "Destroy the heart?" Maera nodded. "Yes, but it's not just the heart we have to kill. It's the thing that controls it, the entity at its core. The one that calls the leviathans, that bends the sky to its will." I felt my legs go weak. "And you can stop it?" Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw the full weight of what she had carried with her all this time, the burden of knowing what had to be done. "No," she said quietly. "I can't. But I can weaken it. I can sever its hold on this place long enough for you to finish it." I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say anything, the air around us shifted, and a voice, an ancient, bone-chilling voice, rippled through the chasm, reverberating through the very core of the Skyreef. "You cannot escape," it whispered, its words carried on the wind, as if they came from the depths of the sky itself. I froze. The voice wasn't just a sound. It was a presence, a force that reached deep into my soul, wrapping around my mind, trying to pull me into its embrace. "The Skyreef is eternal." The earth trembled, and the heart of the Skyreef pulsed again, stronger this time, as if responding to the voice. The creature, the one that had been stalking us, let out another deafening roar, this time closer than before. Maera stepped forward, clutching the black stone in her hand. "Jax," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. "Whatever happens next, remember, this is the only way out." The voice, "The Skyreef is eternal," echoed in my skull, reverberating through my mind like a death knell. It wasn't just a whisper in the air. It was a presence. It was alive. And with it, I could feel the Skyreef shift, feel its hunger swell. Something was awakening within the chasm, something ancient and terrifying. I was standing on the edge of the abyss, the heart of the sky reef pulsing in the center of the void before me, and I could feel the world holding its breath. Maera didn't hesitate. She moved forward, her eyes locked on the swirling mass of energy in the chasm. Her hands gripped the black stone with such force I thought her fingers would crack the sharp edges. The stone glowed faintly in her palm, as though it were responding to the heart's pulse. "We need to sever its connection," Maera said, her voice calm despite the chaos around us. "The stone will disrupt the bond between the entity and the heart, but it's only temporary. We have to do it now." I wanted to ask how, or what would happen once the stone was placed, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. My throat was dry, and the very air around us felt like it was closing in, thick with the oppressive weight of the Skyreef's power. The chasm beneath us trembled, its edges fracturing as if the very ground were splitting apart. The heart's pulse grew stronger, brighter, faster. It was as if it were sensing Maera's intention, fighting back against the intrusion. I glanced up. The sky had darkened, an unnatural twilight settling in, and the mist had become dense, suffocating. Above us, the leviathans circled, their massive wings cutting through the clouds like spectral giants. The creature we had seen earlier was among them, closer now, its form growing larger and more menacing by the second. Then came the whisper again. "You are bound to the sky reef. You cannot escape it." The words curled inside my mind like a serpent, coiling tighter, squeezing the very will from my chest. I tried to push it out, tried to ignore it, but the presence was growing stronger, pressing against me like a weight, suffocating me. And then it happened. The stone in Maera's hand began to hum with an energy that shook the air around us. The pulse of the heart responded, frenetic, angry. The ground beneath us cracked, and a deep rumbling sound erupted from the depths of the chasm, as if something enormous were rising from below. I heard Maera's voice, sharp and filled with desperation. "Jax, take the stone. Now!" Without thinking, I reached out and took the stone from her hand. It burned against my skin, the energy surging through my arm like a live wire. The air around us thickened, and the earth seemed to tremble beneath our feet. The heart was waking, no longer just a force, but a presence, a consciousness that filled the entire sky reef. The leviathan roared above us, and then the heart pulsed again. But this time it was different. It was louder, more frantic, as though the creature inside the heart was struggling to break free. And then it spoke. The voice that had echoed in my mind earlier was now no longer a whisper but a deafening cacophony. "You are mine. You cannot escape. The sky reef is eternal. You belong to me." The stone in my hand flared with brilliant, blinding light, and a shockwave of energy exploded outward, shaking the very foundations of the sky reef. A scream rose from the chasm, a guttural, inhuman wail that rattled the bones of everything nearby. The air thickened, the mist swirling violently, and I felt something alive, clawing at my mind, trying to pull me into the abyss. "Maera!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. "What do we do now? What's happening?" She stood beside me, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "It's weakening," she said, though her voice was barely audible above the growing roar of the heart. "We have to keep it destabilized. The stone is absorbing its power, but it won't hold forever. We need to." Before she could finish, the earth shuddered violently, and the creature, the entity that had been speaking through the heart, released another roar, this one so loud it seemed to tear through the very fabric of the sky. The leviathans above us began to screech in pain, their massive forms twisting in the air, as if drawn into a vortex. The heart of the sky reef pulsed one final time, a blinding flash of light erupting from its center, and everything went silent. In that moment, everything stopped. The air held its breath. The leviathans hung motionless, their massive bodies frozen in the sky. The ground beneath us stopped shaking, and the mist, which had once swirled violently, became still. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe we had succeeded. But then I felt it. A cold, seeping darkness that washed over me like a flood, pulling at my consciousness, dragging me toward the edge of the chasm. The voice, the entity, spoke again, but this time it was different. It was laughing. You cannot destroy me. I am eternal. The sky reef is mine. The air cracked, and the ground splintered as the heart pulsed again. This time with a force so intense, I thought the entire island would tear apart. The stone in my hand vibrated violently, and I felt the energy in it draining away, slipping from my grasp. Maera's voice was sharp, filled with panic. Jax, the stone. It's breaking. We don't have much time. I turned toward her, but before I could respond, the heart erupted in a violent explosion of light and energy. The shockwave hit us both like a tidal wave, sending me crashing to the ground. I tried to crawl, but the force of it was too much and my vision blurred. Through the haze, I saw Maera standing above me, her hands raised toward the sky, her face a mask of determination. We have to end this now, she screamed. The Skyreef's heart must die. But just as she spoke, the creature, the entity, appeared before us, its massive form coiling out of the chasm, its eyes glowing with an unnatural fire. It was a leviathan, yes, but it was no ordinary one. It was the source, the origin, the hunger that had driven the sky reef. Its wings stretched out to envelop the sky, and its mouth opened in a grotesque, yawning maw that seemed to devour everything in its path. I didn't know how much longer we could last. The heart pulsed again, and the stone in my hand was starting to crack, the energy inside it bleeding away. The entity's presence was overwhelming, its hunger suffocating. But in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about survival. This was a battle for the sky reef itself. The creature before me loomed like a god of the sky, its massive form twisting and undulating, its wings beating with the force of hurricanes. The energy radiating from it made the very air shimmer, thick and choking. My chest felt tight, the weight of its presence pressing against me like 1,000 storms. I could feel it in my bones. Its hunger, the sky reef's hunger. The heart of the sky reef was dying, but the entity that had once been its servant now stood in its place. And it was no longer bound by the rules of the world. It was free. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding. The stone in my hand was cracking, the energy inside it flickering like a dying flame. Maera stood beside me, her face pale, sweat slicking her skin, her eyes wild with fear and determination. We need to stop it, she gasped, her voice hoarse, before it takes everything. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw just how much she had sacrificed to get us this far. Her eyes weren't just filled with fear anymore. There was something else, something darker, something I hadn't understood until now. You're the keeper of the sky reef, I said, my voice unsteady. You know how to stop it. How do we kill it? Maera didn't answer right away. Her gaze was fixed on the creature above us, her jaw clenched in concentration. The leviathan, the entity that controlled the sky reef, was circling us now, its massive wings slicing through the air like blades. I could feel the pull of it, a gravitational force that seemed to draw my very soul toward it. The ground beneath us cracked again, sending tremors through the sky. The mist swirled violently, and I could see the islands around us trembling as if they, too, feared the creature's presence. Then Maera's voice broke through the chaos. I can't stop it, not alone. I blinked, trying to understand what she meant. What do you mean, not alone? She turned to face me, her eyes dark, almost haunted. The stone can't do it by itself. We have to channel its power together. The heart and the stone. Only by binding them together can we sever the creature's connection to the sky reef. My breath caught in my throat. But that means we have to sacrifice ourselves, doesn't it? Maera's expression softened, and for a brief moment, I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of what she was about to ask. Yes, the stone's power is tied to the sky reef's heart, but it can only be unleashed by a sacrifice. It will consume us. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, but it wasn't from the creature. It was the realization of what Maera was saying. The creature, the entity that had fed off the sky reef's power for centuries, had to be destroyed, and the only way to do it was for us to become part of it. part of the sky reef. I shook my head, trying to steady myself. We don't have a choice, do we? Maera didn't answer. She just looked at the creature above us, its glowing eyes now locked onto her. It knew what we were about to do, could sense the threat, and it was no longer content to let us fight for control. The ground rumbled again, and the leviathan swooped low, its maw snapping with terrifying speed. The roar that followed was deafening, a sound so primal it shook the very air. The sky reef itself seemed to shudder in response, its ancient hunger rising like a storm. The stone in my hand pulsed again, brighter now, the cracks in it spreading as if it were alive. Maera's eyes were fixed on it, her expression one of resolve, but also something else, something deeper. Now, she said, her voice a whisper. Without thinking, I stepped toward her, holding the stone out between us. The moment our hands touched, the air around us exploded with energy. It was like the entire sky reef was screaming in agony. The stone surged with power, flooding our bodies with an energy that burned through every cell. My vision blurred, and I could feel myself splitting, as though my very essence was being torn in two. The heart of the sky reef pulsed in time with the energy building inside us. It was no longer a distant force. It was part of us now, its power surging through our veins, its hunger pulling us toward the abyss. But we couldn't stop. Not now. I turned to Maera, my mouth dry, my voice a rasp. We need to finish this. She nodded, her grip tightening around the stone. Together, we raised it toward the sky, toward the creature that had once been the ruler of this place. The heart of the sky reef beat faster, louder, like the ticking of a clock counting down to its final breath. Then, in a single, shuddering moment, we let go. A blinding light erupted from the stone, swallowing everything in its path. The air screamed with the force of it, and the ground cracked open, splitting like the earth itself was dying. The creature, the leviathan, screamed, its body writhing in agony as the light reached it, enveloping it completely. It was a battle of pure, unbridled energy. The force of the sky reef's heart trying to hold onto its power, and the stone that we had used to sever its bond. The two forces collided with a deafening crash, and the entire island seemed to shudder, the air itself splitting apart. The creature let out one final, terrible scream, and then, silence. I felt the energy drain from my body, the stone turning cold in my hands as the light faded, leaving only darkness in its wake. The ground stopped shaking. The mist dissipated. The leviathans, once wild and free, fell from the sky, their bodies crumpling to the ground like broken statues. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. The weight of the sky reef's power was gone, but so was everything else. The very air around me felt empty, hollow, as though the world itself had lost its heartbeat. Maera stood beside me, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes were no longer filled with fear. Instead, there was a strange, final peace in them. "It's over," she whispered, but I knew better than to believe that. The sky reef was dead, but so was a part of us. The creature was gone, the heart was destroyed, but the cost was something neither of us could ever fully understand. I looked up at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as a keeper of the sky reef, but as someone who had been bound to it for far too long. Someone who had given everything to save it, even if it meant losing herself. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words were lost in the wind. We had saved the sky reef, but the question remained, was it worth it? The islands around us were still, the air clear for the first time in what felt like an eternity. But the sky reef was no longer a place of power. It was just a graveyard now. The wind was still, too still. We stood in the aftermath, two figures in the center of a world that had just torn itself apart. The mist that had once thickened the air around us was gone, and in its place, a silence that pressed against my ears like a weight. The sky above was a murky gray, its endless expanse free of the leviathans that had once circled it like gods. The islands, suspended in the air as if by magic, hung eerily still, their jagged forms now quiet. The whole of the sky reef felt empty. The winds, once wild and untamed, were calm, but they felt unnatural, like the air itself had forgotten how to breathe. I could still feel the remnants of the energy that had flooded my body, the power of the heart, the weight of the stone. It was like a scar inside me, a cold emptiness that I couldn't shake. My hands trembled as I looked down at the cracked remnants of the stone, its dark edges still faintly glowing, though its power had long since bled away. Maera, my voice cracked. I wasn't sure if I could say anything else. The words were stuck in my throat, trapped by the enormity of what we had just done. Maera stood beside me, her head slightly lowered, her face gaunt and pale. Her eyes were distant, as though she were seeing something far beyond the wreckage of the sky reef, something I couldn't understand. I wanted to ask her if she was okay, if we were okay, but I couldn't bring myself to. The truth was, there was no okay anymore. The sky reef had died, and with it, everything we had fought to protect. "We did it," Maera said, her voice soft but carrying a weight I couldn't ignore. "It's over." The words echoed in my mind. It's over. But was it? Was this truly an end? Or was it the beginning of something worse? I turned to look at her. She was staring off into the distance, where the horizon should have been, but there was no sun, no stars, just a void, like the sky had been stripped of its color, its life. "Maera, are you sure?" I asked, the uncertainty in my voice raw. "Is it really over?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she reached down and picked up a jagged shard of rock from the ground. Her fingers traced the sharp edges slowly, almost absent-mindedly. Then, her gaze met mine, and there was something in her eyes, something dark. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I don't think we'll ever know." I watched as her fingers clenched around the shard, a small cut forming on her palm from the pressure. But she didn't flinch. "The sky reef is gone, Jax," she continued, her voice barely audible, as if she were speaking to herself. "But so much of it was tied to me. I don't know how much of me is still here." I took a step closer to her, the words I wanted to say catching in my throat. It wasn't just the sky reef that had died. She had given everything to keep it alive for so long. She was the keeper of the islands, the heart of their endless storms. And now that was gone. What was left for her? For us? The wind began to stir again, weak at first, but growing in strength. It carried with it the scent of something unfamiliar: saltwater, earth, something alive. And for the first time, I felt a strange pull toward it. Maera glanced at me, and I saw the question in her eyes. It was the same question I had been asking myself since we had destroyed the heart. What comes next? "We need to go," I said, the urgency in my voice rising. I didn't know where to, or what we'd find, but I knew staying here, lingering in the wreckage, wouldn't help. We needed to leave the sky reef behind, even if we didn't fully understand the consequences. Maera nodded, though she didn't move at first. She just stood there, staring at the empty sky, her hand still gripping the shard. After a moment, she dropped it to the ground, the sharp sound of it clattering on the stone carrying through the air like a final echo. "I don't know where we'll go, Jax," she said, almost to herself. "I don't know if there's anywhere left." I looked around at the floating islands that once held so much power, now reduced to silent, lifeless rocks suspended in the air. Without the heart, without the force that had bound them together, they were nothing more than broken fragments. But in that emptiness, there was something else, a possibility. The sky reef was gone, yes, but there was a new world out there. We could find it. We had to. I put my hand on Maera's shoulder, the weight of it offering something close to comfort. "We'll figure it out," I said. "We always do." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time since we had arrived in the sky reef, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't resignation or fear. It was a glimmer of hope. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. Maera turned and started walking, her steps slow but steady. She didn't look back. I followed her, not knowing what lay ahead, but knowing that I couldn't turn back now. We couldn't turn back. The heart of the sky reef was destroyed. The leviathans had fallen. The winds had quieted. The islands were beginning to crumble. But the air around us was changing. Something new was stirring, something that had been waiting in the wake of the Skyreef's death. As we walked, the ground beneath us rumbled, just slightly, and a sound, soft at first, began to hum in the distance. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of grass, of earth, of water. Maera paused, her head turning toward the horizon. For a brief moment, her face looked different. Not just tired, not just burdened by what had happened, but alive. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice soft. I paused too, straining to listen. It was faint, but I could hear it. A rhythm, a pulse, like the heartbeat of something new. The islands around us trembled again, not from the force of the Skyreef's death, but from something else. Something alive. It was distant, but growing closer. The world wasn't ending. It was beginning. "Maera?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. She turned to face me, and for the first time I saw her smile. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, faint yet undeniable. "We're not done yet, Jax," she said, her eyes bright with something new, something I hadn't seen in her before. "The Skyreef might be gone, but the world is still turning. And maybe it's time to find out what happens next." I nodded slowly, my heart still racing, but something inside me felt lighter. Maybe the Skyreef was gone, but something else was beginning. The sky was no longer a prison. It was wide open, stretching out into the unknown. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I believed that we could survive it. The islands had crumbled, the heart was destroyed, and the leviathans had fallen. But the world still whispered its secrets. The wind was alive again, and it was carrying us toward something new. We didn't speak for hours as we walked through the silence. The islands behind us, what was left of them, were fading into the distance, slowly vanishing into the haze that had formed in the wake of the Skyreef's collapse. It was as though the world was exhaling, as if it had held its breath for too long and was now slowly, painfully, letting go. I kept my eyes fixed ahead, not wanting to look back at the destruction we'd caused. There was no denying it, we had killed the Skyreef. But even if we had shattered its heart, even if we had destroyed its power, it didn't mean the world was truly free. There were always consequences, and I wasn't sure we were ready for them. The wind carried the scent of something new now, a soft breeze that wasn't like the violent gusts of the Skyreef, but something gentler, more familiar. It was the smell of fresh earth, of rain-soaked ground, of life. A part of me wanted to stop, to wait, to listen, to understand what it meant. But another part of me, probably the part that was still reeling from the destruction we'd wrought, just wanted to keep moving forward. Keep walking until the ache in my chest faded, until the weight of the past finally slipped away. But as we walked, the sky above us seemed to open up, revealing something that made me pause. There, in the distance, past the fog and the remnants of floating islands, I saw something I had never imagined: the edges of a continent. The horizon stretched wide and vast, and beyond it, the land was green and sprawling, dotted with towering mountains and deep, untouched forests. The sky was clear, the sun breaking through the clouds, and the air, this air, felt different. It was real. "Maera?" I whispered, my voice tight. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it wasn't this. "What is that?" Maera had stopped too, her gaze fixed on the same distant land. I watched as her eyes flickered with something: recognition. Maybe? Hope? Fear? "I don't know," she said quietly, but there was something in her voice. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't surprise. It was familiarity. I turned to look at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "You've seen this before." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes scanning the horizon, her face unreadable. "It's not a place I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's something I felt." She paused, then looked at me, her eyes intense, almost haunted. I think it's where the Skyreef came from." The words hit me like a blow to the gut. Where the Skyreef came from. "Maera?" I started, but the words faltered as I tried to understand. Are you saying the Skyreef was born from this land? From this world? She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the horizon. In a way, the Skyreef wasn't just an island, Jax. It was a vessel, a fragment of something far older. It was brought here, from somewhere else. I felt a chill run down my spine, my mind racing to make sense of her words. If the Skyreef had come from this land, this world, what did that mean for us? For everything we had known? If the Skyreef was just a piece of something larger, then what else had we destroyed in the process? The questions swirled inside me, but I couldn't voice them. Not yet. Not with the weight of the Skyreef's death still pressing on my chest. As we stood there, the world around us began to shift. The wind picked up again, but it was different now. It wasn't violent, like the gusts that had once howled through the floating islands. This wind was steady, calm, like it had always been this way, like it had been waiting for us to arrive. "We should go," Maera said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, something that made my blood run cold. "Before we're noticed." I turned to her, confused. Noticed? By what? She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know, but this place, it's not as empty as it looks." That was all she said before she turned and started walking toward the land in the distance. I followed her without question. There was something urgent in her steps, something that told me we were no longer free of danger. The Skyreef was gone, but it had left something behind. A trail of destruction, yes, but also a new path. And that path was leading us deeper into the unknown. The air grew thicker as we approached the edge of the land. The wind, once steady, began to pick up in strength, and the temperature dropped suddenly. The lush green fields ahead of us seemed to pulse with life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the distance. Then I saw them. Shadows moved at the edge of the forest, dark shapes flitting between the trees. I squinted, trying to make them out, but they were too quick, too elusive. "Maera?" I whispered, my pulse quickening. "What are they?" She didn't answer at first. Her eyes were locked on the forest, her body tense, as though she could feel them too. Then finally she spoke. "They're the Guardians." I turned to her, confusion twisting in my gut. "Guardians?" She nodded. "The creatures that protect this land. They were here long before the Skyreef arrived, and they'll be here long after it's gone." Before I could ask what she meant, there was a sound. A low growl, deep and resonant, coming from the trees. Then something stepped into view. It was large, almost impossibly so. Its body covered in thick, mossy fur that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Its eyes glowed faintly, golden like the sun at dusk, and its massive limbs moved with a grace that seemed unnatural for something so enormous. It stood at the edge of the trees, watching us with a gaze that was both curious and wary. It was like a living shadow, a part of the land itself, and yet it was alive. The guardians of this land weren't creatures of the Skyreef. They were something else entirely. Something ancient, something wild. "Do they mean us harm?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Maera didn't answer right away. She took a step forward, her eyes never leaving the guardian. Then she spoke softly, words I couldn't understand, in a language that was old and strange. The guardian's gaze softened, and it stepped back into the shadows of the trees, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. "They don't want us here," Maera said quietly, turning to face me. "But they won't stop us either. Not yet." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling deep into my chest. This world was different. It wasn't like the Skyreef. It was older, wilder. And it wasn't just waiting for us. It was watching us. "Then what do we do now?" I asked, my voice heavy with the weight of everything that had come before. Maera looked at me, her face hardening with resolve. "We move forward. We have no choice now. But we have to be careful. The Guardians won't let us disturb the balance here. We'll have to earn our place." And with that, we walked on, deeper into the unknown. The world around us was quiet, too quiet. The wind, which had once seemed so unfamiliar, was now a constant presence. It whispered through the trees, rustled the leaves in a low, rhythmic hum. It was a sound I couldn't place. Not like the winds of the Skyreef. It was alive, almost sentient, like the land itself was breathing. We moved through the underbrush, the thick trees closing in around us as we descended into a narrow valley. The guardian from before, whatever it had been, had disappeared, blending back into the forest as if it had never been there. But I could feel its presence still, like a shadow stretching across the land. Something about this place watched us, its eyes hidden, but always there. Maera was walking ahead of me, her pace quickening as if she had some sense of urgency, though she didn't speak. She was lost in thought, her face drawn in concentration. I couldn't help but notice how her steps had changed since we arrived here. She no longer walked with the uncertainty of someone trapped in the Skyreef's prison. There was something about this place that seemed to draw her in, like it was pulling her deeper into its mystery. Finally, after a long silence, I spoke. Maera, what is this place? What did you mean when you said it was where the Skyreef came from? She slowed her pace, glancing back at me, her eyes distant but knowing. It's the source, she said, as though the answer should have been obvious. The source. I repeated, the word unfamiliar on my tongue. What's that? Maera didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stopped and looked around as though ensuring no one was listening, though I had no idea who or what could be listening. It's the origin, she finally said, her voice quiet but steady. The Skyreef didn't come from nowhere. It was taken from here, from the source, when the first ones came. I could feel a shiver run down my spine. The first ones. The term sounded ancient, like it belonged in a story lost to time. Maera nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. The Skyreef, the creatures, the winds, all of it came from here, from this land, a long time ago. The first ones, they were the ones who took it all. But they didn't leave empty-handed. They left a piece of themselves behind, and that's what the Skyreef was. A fragment of their world, brought to ours. Why did they take it? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. In this world, nothing seemed to be purely about survival. It always seemed to involve something darker. Maera's eyes flickered, a shadow crossing her face. Power, control. They sought to harness the source, to use it for their own gain. But they didn't understand it. Not completely. They thought they could control it, bind it, but it was never meant to be tamed. The Skyreef was just a piece of what was left after they destroyed the balance. Took a step closer, my mind racing. So the Skyreef wasn't meant to be a prison. It wasn't meant to be what it became. She shook her head slowly, her gaze lowering to the ground. No. The Skyreef wasn't meant to be anything. It was supposed to be part of something greater. But when the first ones took it, they broke it. They broke everything. And it's been dying ever since. I looked at her, feeling a knot of guilt twist in my gut. We had been part of that destruction. We had been the ones to pull the final thread and sever the last link to the Skyreef's heart. And now, this land, the source, was all that remained. I didn't speak for a moment, my mind reeling with the weight of her words. The Skyreef wasn't just an island, wasn't just a force of nature. It was a fragment of something far older, far more powerful. And now it was gone. The consequences of our actions were more far-reaching than I had realized. Maera's voice broke through my thoughts. We have to keep moving. The source is dangerous, Jax. The Guardians will only let us go so far. I nodded, not fully understanding but sensing the truth of her words. There was something else out there, something older than the Skyreef, and it was watching us. We walked in silence for a while longer, until the trees began to thin and the valley opened into a vast, rolling plain. The ground was covered in tall, swaying grass that seemed to whisper as the wind passed through. Ahead of us, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. A massive structure, half hidden by the foliage, its stone walls crumbling with age. It looked like a temple or what was left of one. Maera stopped abruptly. I almost walked into her. Maera? I asked, confused. What is this place? She was staring at the temple, her eyes narrowed, her body tense. This is where it all began, she said quietly. The first ones built this place, and it's where the heart of the source lies. I stepped closer to her, my pulse quickening. The heart of the source? What do you mean? Maera didn't answer right away. She was still staring at the ruins, her face pale. It's the key, she whispered. The heart is what keeps the balance. It's what the first ones tried to control. But they lost it. They lost everything. I glanced at the ruins again, feeling an odd pull toward them. There was a strange energy in the air, an unease that made my skin crawl. The wind had picked up, swirling around us in small, chaotic gusts, and the tall grass bent low, as though bowing to something unseen. Do we go in? I asked, but even as the words left my mouth, I already knew the answer. Maera nodded. We have to. We're not the only ones looking for it. I didn't need to ask who else might be after the heart. The Guardians weren't the only danger here. There were darker forces, ancient ones, waiting for the right moment to reclaim what they had lost. And now that we had come this far, we couldn't turn back. We moved toward the ruins, our steps cautious, the silence of the land around us pressing in like a weight. The temple loomed larger with each step, its jagged stones and broken walls a testament to the passage of time. But there was something else beneath the crumbling exterior. A pulse, a heartbeat that seemed to echo from the very ground itself. As we stepped through the shattered archway, the air thickened. The darkness within the temple was oppressive, like it was holding its breath, waiting for us to make the next move. And then we heard it, a low rumble, a voice, ancient and guttural, rising from the depths of the temple. We weren't alone. The rumble echoed again, low and vibrating through the stone beneath our feet. I froze. Maera did the same, her eyes wide and alert, scanning the shadows that stretched long across the temple's vast interior. The air felt thick with an energy that I couldn't name, a strange pull that seemed to come from the very heart of the structure. Something's down there. I could feel it. The weight of the temple's forgotten secrets pressing down on me, like the walls themselves were alive, watching us, waiting. The shadows moved in odd ways, stretching unnaturally, as if they were alive too, shifting in the flickering light from the entrance behind us. Maera's breath was shallow, her hand instinctively reaching for the blade at her side. But it wasn't the same calm readiness that I had seen in her before. This was different, urgent, cautious, filled with a kind of dread I couldn't understand. Maera, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What is it? She didn't answer right away. Her gaze was locked ahead, her body tensed like a coiled spring. We're not alone, she muttered. Her voice was low, strained, like she was trying to keep herself steady. I had no idea what that meant, but I knew enough to trust her instincts. We weren't alone, and we were about to find out just how far the dangers of this place reached. There was another rumble, louder this time, and then the ground beneath our feet trembled. I staggered for a moment, trying to keep my balance as the stone walls around us seemed to groan with the weight of something ancient stirring beneath them. Move! Maera hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward a narrow passageway on the right side of the temple. We didn't have time to ask questions. We didn't have time for anything but getting away from whatever was waking up below us. We ran, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the empty halls as we rushed down the passageway. The walls seemed to close in around us as we descended deeper into the earth. The temperature dropped, and I could feel the chill of the stone seeping into my bones. The passageway opened up into a vast underground chamber, far larger than I had expected. The air here was colder, almost suffocating, and the smell of decay and earth was thick. In the center of the room was a massive stone altar, its surface slick with what appeared to be old bloodstains, the stone cracked and worn from centuries of neglect. But it wasn't the altar that caught my attention. It was what lay beyond it. A gigantic stone door, half buried in rubble, stood at the far end of the chamber. Its surface was adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to shift in the dim light, like they were alive, reacting to our presence. The carvings were of beasts, terrifying, grotesque creatures, their eyes glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. Is that the heart? I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. Maera didn't answer immediately. She was scanning the chamber, her eyes darting from corner to corner, the tension in her body unmistakable. But when her gaze shifted to the stone door, there was something in her eyes, a recognition, a knowledge of the danger that lay beyond it. "No," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the stillness. "That's not the heart. Not the one we're looking for." I frowned, confused. "Then what is it?" Maera didn't answer, but she started walking toward the door, her steps slow, deliberate. She reached out, her hand brushing the cool stone surface of the carvings. The moment her fingers touched the surface, the ground beneath us rumbled again, this time with a force that sent tremors through the chamber. A low, guttural growl emanated from deep within the earth, vibrating through the walls. It was unlike any sound I had heard before, louder than the wind, deeper than the rumbling of the sky. It was a call to something ancient, something that had been waiting. Maera's face paled as the sound reverberated through the chamber, but she didn't back away. "We have to hurry," she said, her voice barely audible over the growing noise. "The Guardians won't let us touch it. If we don't move fast enough, we'll be buried alive." "Buried alive?" I asked, a cold dread creeping into my chest. "What are you talking about?" The stone door began to shift, grinding against the floor as if something inside was pushing it open. My heart thudded in my chest, and every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of the temple before whatever was inside that door was released. But Maera didn't move. She was staring at the door, her expression grim. "The first ones weren't the only ones who tried to control the source," she said, her voice growing more urgent. "They locked something away down here, something they couldn't control. And now, it's waking up." I took a step back, my mind racing. "What did they lock away, Maera?" Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the weight of everything that had led us to this point. Her connection to the Skyreef, to the source, to everything that had been lost. It was all coming together now. "They locked away the true heart of the source," she said. "The real power of this land. And if it's released..." The door shuddered violently, and then, with a terrible crack, it burst open. I barely had time to react before a wave of energy slammed into me, knocking me off my feet. The air around me warped and twisted, the light in the chamber flickering as if it couldn't decide whether to exist or not. The ground shook violently, and I heard something huge, moving inside the chamber. It was a growl, but it was a growl unlike anything I had ever heard before. A deep, guttural sound, like the roar of a beast that had been slumbering for millennia. And then, through the dark haze, I saw it. A massive, writhing form emerging from the darkness. Its shape was almost too large to comprehend, its body covered in jagged scales that glowed faintly with a sickly green light. Its eyes were the size of boulders, burning with an ancient fury. It was the heart of the source, yes, but it was no heart I had ever imagined. It was something other, something that didn't belong in this world. Its massive jaws opened wide, and I heard the unmistakable sound of bones breaking, crushing, twisting. It was waking up, and we had just unleashed it. "Maera!" I shouted, panic clawing at my throat. "We need to get out of here. Now!" But Maera was already moving, her steps swift and determined. She was headed toward the altar, her eyes locked on the twisted, writhing form that was now slowly crawling out of the stone door. "It's too late, Jax," she said, her voice low and full of despair. "The Guardians can't stop it. We can't stop it." I took a step toward her, trying to reach her, but the room seemed to be closing in. The beast was growing larger, its movements causing the very walls to tremble. "Maera, what are you doing?" I yelled, but she didn't respond. The ground cracked beneath my feet, and I barely had time to leap out of the way before the earth split wide open. I turned, my heart hammering, as I saw Maera standing at the altar, her arms raised toward the beast, her face a mask of determination. It was clear now. She had always known what this place was, and now she was ready to face whatever the first ones had left behind. But was she ready to survive it? The world had shifted in an instant. The moment the beast crawled out of the chamber, the air around us crackled, as if the very atmosphere had been charged with its presence. It was like the land itself was reacting, trembling, cracking, breaking apart. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind spinning as I watched the massive form unfurl in front of me. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its scales were jagged, sharp as knives, and glowed with a sickly, pulsating green light that cut through the dim shadows of the temple. Its eyes were the size of boulders, glowing with an otherworldly fury, and its mouth opened in a silent scream, its vast, cavernous jaws revealing rows of teeth that could crush entire mountains. The ground beneath us cracked again, the earth groaning in protest as the creature began to move, its body twisting, coiling, dragging itself free of the stone that had bound it for eons. It was a force of nature, a primal thing, and the world had been too long without it. The walls of the temple shook violently, as though the very foundation of the world was buckling beneath the weight of this thing. Dust and rubble fell from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. And yet, amid the chaos, there was something else, something almost familiar about this creature. It felt like the heart of the source had always been a part of me, like it had always been calling to me, hidden in the deep recesses of my mind. But no, this wasn't something to be embraced. This was destruction. Maera! I shouted, my voice hoarse as I stumbled toward her. She was standing in front of the altar, her arms outstretched, her face fixed in a mask of calm as she stared at the monster that had just broken free. Her eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Was it resolve? Maera, we have to get out of here. I shouted again, but she didn't budge. She was locked in place, her body taut as though she were communing with the beast, or perhaps controlling it. I reached out to her, grabbing her arm and pulling her back, but she didn't move. There was no resistance in her body. She wasn't trying to fight me. She was just listening. We don't have time for this, I said, panic rising in my chest. We can't stay here. This thing is going to destroy everything. Maera's eyes shifted slowly toward me, and for a moment, I saw something in them, something I hadn't noticed before. It was as if her mind had already left the physical world, as though she were standing on the edge of something other, something that wasn't tied to this place at all. I know, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, but we have no choice, Jax. My heart slammed against my ribcage. What do you mean, no choice? We need to leave. Now, this thing. I glanced back toward the creature, which was now twisting and thrashing in the chamber, its enormous body moving with a speed and grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. The ground shook violently beneath its movements, and I had the distinct feeling that it was hunting. But Maera didn't seem to hear me. She turned toward the altar, her gaze still distant. The wind began to whip around the chamber, swirling with a force that should have been impossible underground. The carvings on the walls seemed to pulse, as if they were responding to her presence, and the heartbeat of the source beneath the stone grew louder, a steady thrum that echoed in my chest. I've been waiting for this, Maera said, her voice filled with something peaceful. This is what I was meant to do. Before I could say anything, the creature turned its enormous head toward us. Its eyes locked on Maera, and I felt a chill run through me. There was no mistaking it, it had seen her. It was drawn to her, as though it recognized her in a way I couldn't understand. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with a strange energy that I could feel deep in my bones. Maera's hands slowly lowered to her sides, her fingers trembling slightly. But she didn't back away. She didn't flinch. It was as though she were trying to calm it. I could feel my own fear rise in my chest. I didn't know what Maera had become, but I knew she wasn't the same person I had been traveling with. She was connected to this place, to the source in ways I hadn't fully understood. And that connection was pulling her toward the creature, the very heart of the source. A roar rumbled from deep within the beast, reverberating through the walls of the temple like a war drum, signaling its power. The sound was so powerful that it made my vision blur. The ground beneath us cracked wider, and I heard something else. A voice, distant, echoing in the depths of my mind. The heart of the source is a curse, not a blessing. The voice was ancient, guttural, as if the stone itself was speaking. I felt it scrape against my skull, digging into my consciousness like an invasive thing. I staggered back, clutching my head, but Maera didn't even flinch. Her eyes were fixed on the creature, her lips moving soundlessly, and I realized she was communicating with it. She was binding it. "Maera, stop!" I yelled, but she didn't respond. The beast was still thrashing, but its movements were slowing, its massive body relaxing as though it were listening to her. I stepped forward, reaching out to her once more, but this time, she turned to face me. Her eyes, those eyes, were no longer the same. They were black now, all-consuming, the darkness spreading from them like ink bleeding into water. "Jax," she said, her voice different, colder. "You don't understand. We have to let it go. The source was never meant to be locked away. It's time for the world to be reborn." Reborn? My voice was shaky, my chest tight with fear. "Maera, this isn't rebirth. This is destruction. We're not saving anything. We're unleashing it." She didn't answer. The beast behind her now seemed calm, unnaturally so, as if it were awaiting something, awaiting her command. Suddenly, I understood. "Maera?" "No," I whispered, a wave of realization crashing over me. "You're not trying to stop it. You're trying to control it." The cold smile that twisted on her lips confirmed my worst fear. "It's the only way, Jax. You were right. The Skyreef was always dying, always meant to fall. But this place, this power, this is what will give us the strength to rebuild everything. Everything we've lost." I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. This was wrong. All wrong. She wasn't the person I had once known. She wasn't my Maera anymore. She had become part of the source, part of something much darker, much older. And now she was choosing to unleash it. "You're destroying us all," I said, my voice breaking as the truth hit me. But she only shook her head, her black eyes fixed on the creature that now stood perfectly still behind her. "No, Jax. I'm saving us." The silence in the temple was deafening now, punctuated only by the soft, unnatural hum of the creature's presence. Its eyes, those vast, swirling orbs, were locked on Maera, watching her with an intelligence I couldn't understand. It was as if she had become its anchor, its vessel, and the entire room pulsed with the dark power she had released. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, my mind racing, trying to piece together how everything had gone so wrong. The Maera I had known, the girl who had fought for freedom, who had lived in the shadows of the Skyreef's chains, had now become a harbinger of destruction, a conduit for a force that could break the world. She has to be stopped. But how? How could I stop her without destroying everything? She was more than just my ally now. She was entwined with the source, with the creature that had been locked away for centuries. She was its keeper, its link to this world. "Maera!" I shouted again, stepping forward, trying to reach her, but her gaze never shifted. She was staring at the creature with a strange, almost loving expression, her eyes dark as voids. She didn't even flinch when I called her name. There was no recognition in her face, no sign that she heard me at all. She was already lost to this place, lost to the source. I could feel the weight of her presence now, the power that flowed between us, the pulse of something ancient thrumming in my veins. I could feel the temptation of it, the lure of something greater, of control, of power beyond measure. And that terrified me. "Maera?" I said again, this time quieter, more pleading. "Please, this isn't you." She finally turned her head to me, the blackness of her eyes swallowing me whole. Her lips curled into a smile, cold and distant. "You don't understand, Jax. This is me. This is what I was always meant to be. The Skyreef wasn't the answer. Neither was our escape. This is." I took a step back, the words searing through me. "No, Maera. You don't have to do this. We can still find another way. Please, this thing isn't salvation. It's destruction. The world isn't ready for this power." Her smile faltered, but she didn't look away from me. The world doesn't need to be ready, Jax. It needs to be reborn. And I am the one who will do it. The words sank into me like a weight. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now there was no going back. I could see the truth in her eyes. She had made her choice. The creature behind her stirred, its colossal form shifting as if it were waking from a deep slumber. Its massive claws scraped the stone floor, its body coiling and uncurling with an eerie grace. For a moment, it seemed as if the very temple was bending to its will, the walls warping, the air thickening with pressure. It was as if the creature itself was the heartbeat of this world, an ancient power awakening after eons of dormancy. Jax, Maera said, her voice soft, almost sorrowful, but her eyes remained firm, unwavering.
I'm sorry.
But I can't go back. Not anymore. I didn't know what to say to that. What could I say? This wasn't the girl I had come to care for, the girl who had risked everything to free herself from the prison of the Skyreef. No, she had become something else entirely, a vessel of the source. And in doing so, she had condemned us all. My pulse was pounding in my ears. The weight of her words was suffocating. The creature loomed behind her, its massive form now fully free, stretching as if it were testing its newfound freedom. The ground beneath us shook again, and I could hear the distant sounds of crashing stone and falling rubble, as though the very temple itself was about to collapse. I had to make a choice. Maera, I said softly, my voice breaking, please, if you really care about the world, you can't let this happen. Her expression softened for a moment, as though my words were reaching her through the fog of the power that surrounded her. But then, in the next instant, the creature's low growl reverberated through the temple again, and the flicker of doubt in Maera's eyes vanished. I care about you, Jax, she said, her voice now cold and distant, but this is the only way. With a final, mournful look, she turned back to face the creature, raising her arms once more. The pulse of power from the source flared brighter around her, and the very air seemed to shudder. I didn't know what I could do anymore. The creature was fully awake now, its form coiling and unfurling like some ancient serpent of the skies. Its eyes burned with a ferocious light, and I could feel its hunger, its longing for release, for control. It was time to act. I grabbed the nearest piece of stone from the floor, a jagged shard of rock, and I hurled it toward Maera, hoping it would snap her out of this trance, this dark influence she was under. But as soon as the rock left my hand, the air around us seemed to shift. Time itself felt like it had slowed, and the rock disintegrated in midair, crumbling to dust. A scream ripped from my throat. No! I was too late. The creature's jaws opened wide, its cavernous mouth stretching impossibly far, and in that moment, the temple itself seemed to scream in agony, the very foundations of the earth shaking. The creature was hungry, and now it was about to feast. But before it could move, a blast of energy, raw, uncontrolled, ripped through the air, forcing me to shield my eyes. The ground trembled violently beneath my feet, and I felt myself being thrown backward, my body slamming against the cold stone walls. When the dust settled, I gasped for breath. My heart was racing, my head spinning, but when I looked up, the temple had changed. The walls were cracking, the floor was crumbling beneath our feet, and the creature had stopped. Its eyes no longer glowing with the fire of fury, but dimming to a hollow black. And then I saw her. Maera was on her knees in front of the altar, her arms raised, her eyes wide and unseeing. The blackness of her pupils had faded, replaced with a look of shock, of disbelief. She was no longer in control. The creature had broken free from her grasp. It was out of her reach. For a fleeting moment, there was silence. Then, Maera's voice broke through. Jax, what have I done? The stone walls groaned as the temple began to collapse around us. The ground cracked open, and I could feel the tremors beneath my feet like the pulse of the world itself beating out its final moments. The air was thick with dust, and the sound of rumbling stone and cracking earth filled the space around us. But amid the chaos, there was one thing that stood still: Maera. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling, still stretched out toward the creature. But now it was no longer a beast she could control. It was an extension of the source itself, vast, unknowable, and ancient. And now it was free, and there was no telling what it might do. "Maera!" I shouted, my voice hoarse from the dust. "Get away from it!" She didn't move. Her face was pale, her lips parted, but her gaze was fixed on the creature, on the massive, writhing form that still stood, motionless behind her. The glow in its eyes had dimmed, but there was something else there now, something other. It was as if the creature had awoken from a long slumber, and it no longer cared for the ties that had once bound it. Maera, the one who had freed it, was now irrelevant in its eyes. The realization hit me like a cold slap. Maera was no longer the one in charge. The source had slipped from her grasp, and now she was a mere vessel, caught in the wake of something far larger than herself. I ran toward her, my legs burning with each step, but my mind was moving faster than my body. What do I do now? What could I possibly do to stop this? "Maera!" I yelled, grabbing her shoulders and shaking her. She looked at me, then really looked at me, and for a brief moment I saw her, the girl I had traveled with, the one who had once been so full of fire and hope. But that fire was gone now, replaced by something I couldn't quite name, something dark. She blinked slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep. Her voice was soft, strained. I tried, Jax. I thought I could control it." I shook my head, disbelief seizing me. "Control it? You didn't just control it, Maera. You unleashed it. This thing, it was locked away for a reason. You don't understand what you've done." Her eyes flickered, but then she looked up at the creature, her expression clouded with uncertainty. The beast hadn't moved, not yet, but I could feel its presence, its hunger growing. The air around us was thickening, the pressure mounting. I could sense the inevitability of what was coming. "I thought I could save us," Maera whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of the collapsing temple. "I thought if I could control it, I could change everything. I could fix the Skyreef, fix this world." She looked up at me, and for a moment, there was something almost desperate in her gaze. "But now, I don't know what's real anymore." The world was falling apart, and we were standing on the edge of it. The source had been awakened, the beast was free, and Maera had become the fulcrum upon which everything balanced. I clenched my fists, fighting the rising tide of panic. The ground beneath our feet trembled again, louder this time, and I could hear the crashing sounds of the temple breaking apart. This place wasn't just falling apart. It was disintegrating. The source was undoing everything in its wake. "Maera, listen to me," I said, my voice firm now, trying to pull her back from the abyss. "You're still here. You can still stop this. You can still fix it." She didn't respond immediately. She seemed to be struggling, as if the weight of what she had done was pressing down on her, and she couldn't breathe beneath it. The creature behind her shifted, its massive form stretching as if waking up from a dream. I could feel its hunger. It was no longer just a beast. It was a force, and it wanted one thing: to consume. "I can't, Jax," Maera whispered, shaking her head. Her voice cracked with the weight of her failure. "It's too late. I've already let it out. I became it." "No," I said, gripping her shoulders tighter. "You're not the source, Maera. You're you. You're still here. Don't give up now." But her expression darkened again, and for the first time, I saw the true extent of her fear. "You don't understand. I'm not in control anymore." Her eyes darted to the beast, which had begun to move again, slowly, like a serpent uncoiling from the depths of the earth. It was massive, its body thick with muscle and power, its eyes burning with an unnatural light. "Jax," Maera whispered, her voice breaking.
"I'm sorry."
And then, before I could stop her, before I could say anything else, Maera reached out toward the creature, toward the source, and her hand brushed against its enormous, shifting form. I watched in horror as the creature responded, its massive tail lashing out in a sudden, violent movement. There was a terrible, ear-splitting sound, a shriek that tore through the very air, and in the blink of an eye, everything around us began to implode. The air thickened and shimmered, and the ground beneath us cracked open wider. I could feel the darkness rising up from the earth, seeping into every crack, every crevice. I yanked Maera back, pulling her away from the creature as the temple itself seemed to shatter. But it was too late. The beast was no longer a passive observer. It was awake, and it was determined to reshape the world in its image. No! I screamed, my voice drowned out by the sound of the temple collapsing. Maera, you have to stop it. We can't let it. But Maera's face was hollow, her eyes empty. She was lost now, completely lost to the power she had unleashed. She had been consumed by it, body and soul. The air around us crackled with a strange, violent energy. The walls of the temple were falling apart, and the ground beneath us was collapsing into a yawning abyss. I could hear the rushing sound of the wind as the temple, this place, was being torn apart piece by piece. In that moment, I realized the truth. It wasn't just the temple that was collapsing. It was the world itself. The source had been awakened, and now the entire Skyreef was beginning to fall into the abyss, pulled apart by the force of the creature's hunger. And there was no stopping it. The earth beneath my feet was splitting open, the cracks widening with every passing second. I could feel the air growing heavier, the very atmosphere thick with an oppressive force that seemed to smother everything in its path. The temple, this once sacred place, was now nothing more than a sinking, crumbling monument to the past. The walls shattered around us like glass, and dust and debris rained down, swirling in the air as if the world itself were coughing up its last breath. I gripped Maera's arm, pulling her toward me, but she didn't resist. She wasn't even there anymore. Her eyes were glazed over, her body limp as if she were already slipping away. The darkness in her gaze had only deepened since the moment she made contact with the creature, and now she was a mere shell of the person I had known. She had become the bridge between the Skyreef and the ancient power of the source, but she had paid the price for it. Couldn't lose her. Not like this. Not after everything we had been through. Maera! I shouted, shaking her again. Listen to me. You have to fight it. You can still come back. Her lips moved slightly, but there was no real focus in her voice. I can't, Jax, she whispered, her words hollow. It's too late. The source is too strong. It's already inside me. I can't stop it. I felt my chest tighten with grief, but I couldn't let that stop me. I had to find a way, anyway, to pull her out of this before the world was torn apart. I turned my head, scanning the temple ruins for any escape route, but it was too late. The temple had already started to collapse in on itself, the massive pillars cracking and breaking apart, the ground buckling as if the very foundation of reality were being undone. But above all, the air felt wrong, charged with a sinister energy that hummed like a warning. And then I saw it. At the heart of the temple, there was a flicker, a pulse of light, faint but growing stronger. It was coming from deep within the altar, from the center of the temple's foundation. The source. It was as if the very core of the Skyreef had been connected to the beast, and now it was feeding off the energy Maera had released. That light, it wasn't just the creature's power. It was the heartbeat of the source itself. I had to reach it. If I could somehow destroy it, maybe I could sever the connection between Maera and the beast, stop the creature from consuming the entire world. But how? How could I possibly reach it in time? Jax? Maera whispered again, her voice weak, distant. You can't stop it. No one can. It's too powerful. I didn't listen to her. Couldn't. There was still a chance. I had to believe that. I bent down, scooping her into my arms despite the pain that surged through my body as the temple trembled beneath us. I ran. No, I flew. Down the crumbling hallways, dodging falling stone and splintering wood. The walls around me groaned like the death rattle of a dying beast. But I pushed forward, determined to reach the heart of the source. With every step, the air grew heavier, thicker, until it was nearly impossible to breathe. The energy in the temple was suffocating, oppressive, like it was actively pushing against me. The walls seemed to bend in on themselves, distorting the very space around me. The creature's presence had made its way into every crevice, every stone. I kept moving. I reached the heart of the temple, where the altar once stood, now shattered and broken. The flickering light was brighter here, pulsing like a heartbeat, the very essence of the source. It was surrounded by a dark, swirling energy, like a storm trapped within a cage. And there it was. The beast, the leviathan, was now fully free, its colossal form looming above me. Its eyes were glowing, fixed on Maera, who was still in my arms. Its mouth opened slightly, as if it were sensing the final piece it needed her. I backed away, holding Maera close, but the creature did not move. It merely watched us, waited. There was no time. I had to act now. I looked at the altar again, at the light pulsing from the depths of the temple. It was the source itself, the heart of the Skyreef. The creature had been bound to it for centuries, and now it had been freed. And Maera had become the key to unlocking its power. I had one choice left. I stepped forward, cradling Maera against me, and I made the hardest decision of my life. Maera, I whispered, my voice shaking. I love you, but if this is the only way, I have to do it. Her lips barely parted, but I could hear the faintest whisper. Please, Jax, stop. I didn't want to. I didn't want to lose her, but the source had already consumed her. It had already marked her. And now there was nothing left but to sever the connection, to destroy the source itself before everything around us was swallowed by the darkness. I closed my eyes, bracing myself. Then, with every ounce of strength I had left, I plunged my hand into the heart of the altar, reaching for the core of the source. The light flared brighter, almost blinding, and a deafening roar filled the air as if the earth itself was screaming in agony. I could feel the energy surging through me, hot, searing, and ancient. It burned as it poured into my veins, and for a moment, I thought I might drown in it. I thought I might become it like Maera had, but I fought. I clung to the last remnants of my humanity. And then, with a final scream, I ripped the core from its place. The moment I did, the world seemed to crack open. The creature screamed. The ground trembled. And Maera gasped, her eyes snapping open as the connection between her and the source was severed. But it wasn't enough. The darkness wasn't finished yet. A low, guttural voice rumbled from the depths of the temple, shaking the walls and tearing at the very fabric of reality. It wasn't the creature, it was something older, something angrier. The source, though momentarily weakened, was still alive. No one escapes me, the voice whispered. Not even you. The ground beneath my feet groaned as I ripped my hand free from the altar. The light flickered, dimming for a moment before flaring once again, searing the world around me. The air was thick with the presence of the source, darker now, more dangerous. But even as the power ebbed, I could feel the remnants of it crashing against me like a tidal wave. The creature behind me, the leviathan, trembled as if it, too, felt the shift. Maera was no longer unconscious in my arms. Her eyes were wide open, but they were lost, empty. I could see the shadows of the source still swirling within her, lingering even as the temple fell apart around us. I could hear the sound of rocks splitting, of the world being torn in two, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the girl in my arms. The girl who had been consumed by a force too powerful for any one person to control. Her chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, her fingers twitching as though trying to reach out for something, or someone. I wasn't sure anymore. Jax! Her voice cracked, a faint whisper, as though she was fighting to speak through the weight of everything that had consumed her. I couldn't stop it. I gritted my teeth, holding her tighter, trying to keep her grounded in this moment, in this reality. You can still come back, Maera. You can still fight this. But the shadows in her eyes deepened, and she looked at me with a strange emptiness that made my stomach turn. It's too late, she whispered. It's all too late. No, I wouldn't accept that. I refused to accept that. I looked toward the altar, the heart of the source still pulsing faintly. But it wasn't just the source anymore. It was the will behind it, the true force that had been awakened. The creature that had fed off Maera's power was just a harbinger, a guardian of something far darker, something that had been imprisoned for centuries, and now it was free. I knew what I had to do. I had to finish what I started. But in that moment, a deep, guttural voice echoed through the temple, reverberating in my bones. "You think you can stop it, boy? You think you can defeat me?" The air grew cold. A dark mist began to rise from the altar, swirling in the air like a storm cloud. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, like the very fabric of the temple was alive, twisting with the entity that had been trapped here for millennia. It was the source itself, the true source, and it was far older, far more powerful than anything Maera or I could have anticipated. I stumbled back, trying to shield Maera from the oncoming onslaught of dark energy. The ground beneath us quaked again, and the temple continued to crumble, stone and debris falling around us like rain. "You destroyed the heart, but you have not destroyed me," the voice boomed, its tone mocking. "I am the will of the Skyreef. I am the ancient power that gave this world its shape and will take it back." I tried to steady myself, fighting against the overwhelming weight of the energy pushing against me. But I couldn't stop the tremors. The walls were collapsing inwards, and I could feel the abyss opening beneath us. "You think you can fight me, Jax?" the voice taunted. "You cannot even save her." My heart clenched at the words, the truth of them. I had been so focused on saving Maera that I had forgotten the bigger picture. The source wasn't just a power Maera had tapped into. It was the very thing that had created the Skyreef, the very thing that had shaped this world, this floating wilderness. And now it was angry. It was fury incarnate. But there was still hope. I couldn't give up. Maera stirred in. My arms again. Her eyes fluttered. But this time, there was something different, something familiar. Her hand reached up weakly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of the girl I had known, the girl who had been determined to change the world. "Jax." Her voice was barely audible. "I can fight it. I can still fight." I shook my head, trying to steady her. "No, Maera. It's too dangerous. You're—" But she reached out with both hands now, gripping my wrist. "I have to stop it. I was the one who unleashed it. I'm the only one who can close the door." Her words were desperate, but I could hear the determination in her voice. She wasn't giving up. Not yet. But I started to protest, but the ground shook violently again, nearly knocking me off my feet. "No," she said, her voice stronger now. "You fought for me this far, Jax. Now, let me fight for us." I could see the storm in her eyes. The source had consumed her, but she was fighting it. She was finding her way back. And in that moment, I realized something I should have known all along. This wasn't about me saving her. This was about Maera saving herself. "Do it," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "Save us both." With a final surge of energy, Maera lifted her hands toward the pulsing light at the center of the temple. The dark mist swirled around us, but this time, Maera fought back. She pushed against it, her voice a fierce whisper as she spoke words I couldn't understand. The walls trembled, and the ground beneath us began to shift. The entity that had been trapped in the source screamed in fury, but Maera's power pushed back harder. The beast behind us roared in frustration, but its movements were slowing. Maera was weakening the connection, fighting the ancient will that had been pulling her into the depths of darkness. I felt a surge of hope. Maera wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for us all, for the Skyreef, for the world that had once held them both captive. The dark mist began to recede, and I saw a faint glimmer of light where Maera's hands touched the center of the altar. The creature behind us seemed to pause, as if stunned. The walls of the temple stopped shaking, and for a brief moment, there was silence. The chaos had stopped, and then the world exploded. The light from the altar flared brighter, as if it were trying to reach the heavens themselves. There was a deafening crack, and the sound of the temple collapsing, the sound of the source being undone. The creature shrieked one last time before vanishing into the void. And then, silence. I was still holding Maera, Her breathing was slow, but steady now. The darkness had lifted, and I could feel her warmth against me again. Her body was no longer trembling with the weight of the source's power. The sky reef was no longer crumbling. The land beneath us, though cracked, was beginning to heal. Maera looked up at me, her expression weak but serene. "We did it," she whispered, her voice raspy but filled with something I hadn't heard in so long. "Hope. We're free." I nodded, tears burning the back of my eyes as I held her tighter. "We're free, Maera." The sky reef wasn't gone. The floating islands were still there, broken but alive. And though the source had been broken, its ancient power no longer held the world captive. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of peace. A sense that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. And as the ruins of the temple crumbled to dust behind us, I knew one thing for sure. The Expanse was no longer a prison. It was our future.